Final Fantasy XVI seeks to revolutionize everything that we know about Final Fantasy. We've never seen a game quite like this before in the franchise. Having just wrapped up my playthrough of the demo of Final Fantasy XVI, I have a lot of thoughts that I'd like to share about it. This game surprised me, and I'm going to share why and all of the good and the bad. As always, I'll try to be as unbiased as possible, but this game, well, it's not what I expected. I'm Solace, this is Solace and Dread. We produce reaction videos as well as analytical content primarily focused on Square Enix, Nintendo, and Capcom publications. We're going to dive into the best and the worst parts of each of the components of this game, or as I'll say in the video from this point on, the Solace and the Dread. And ultimately, my aim is to help you decide if it is worth the $70 price tag. A couple of key things to note: the demo runs about 3 hours. Now that's if you do both parts. The standard demo runs about 2 hours, but then it unlocks an iconic challenge, which puts you much later in the game, where you fight a boss fight. And it's a little bit more challenging, but it'll give you an idea of what the game is supposed to be like as far as gameplay goes later into the game, much later than the demo allows you to play. It's worth noting that everything that happens in the demo will transfer to your full playthrough if you buy the game. The game does retail at $70, and it is a PS5 exclusive for the foreseeable future. Alright, let's get into it. First, we're going to talk about world building and the characters. After a quick action-packed cutscene, the game takes you right into the war-torn world of Valisthea as you take control of Clive, the game's main protagonist. We're introduced to him as an adult on the front lines of a mission skirting behind enemy lines. After a brief stint as an adult, you're taken back to his time as a youth. After a quick training battle, you learn about the world you've been introduced to. You're quickly shown some key characters and learn about who they are as well as the environments that you're in. The Solace. One of the best things about this demo and about this game is the ability to pause in the middle of cutscenes and learn anything that you want about the characters or your environment that you're in. It's called active time lore. I love this. I spent a good amount of time pausing the cutscenes to remind myself who was who and speculating about who each character is and what their arc might be. Not to mention, it updates the entries as you play through the game, indicated by this little blue dot. Beyond that, the story is multifaceted and engaging. I found myself asking questions or saying exactly what the characters would say in certain situations.
I'm not going without you. You're supposed to be my shield, remember?
This is how I protect you.
I remember, which is why I'm going to hold the enemy here while you make your escape.
Frankly, this is how I judge dialogue in a game. If I'm saying what the characters are going to say, well then, it feels natural to me. Clive is your standard RPG protagonist. He's very much duty-bound, and he's a bit of a loner. The other characters, like Cid and Torgal, are very compelling too, but that's the Dread. I really want more from Jill and Benedicta and Torgal or Cid, and I want to know about who these characters are, really. It didn't really ever seem to get past the surface, and I'm going to attribute that to just being the demo. There wasn't really enough time to dive into who these characters are. But I do want these characters to be complex and break out of the tropes that we see them in. Not to mention, in 3 hours of gameplay, not one of the 3 women managed to pass the Bechtel test. In fact, they didn't even interact with each other. I really hope this game passes the Bechtel test. The gameplay. The gameplay is tight. The controls feel good. It's fluid, it's fast. It starts off very basic, but the depth starts getting there quickly the further you go. The Solace. Having played through the base demo and finishing the iconic challenge, which is a second part of the demo that takes you later in the game with more abilities, the fighting was challenging. I took the assistance rings off. They give you extended time to dodge, they automatically heal you, that sort of thing. And I really leaned into the combat just to see how tough it could be. It will definitely be helpful for those less familiar with action games to use those rings. I struggled quite a bit until I got a handle on the abilities. It'll also be a better experience gaining the abilities more slowly over time, so you're accustomed to them. Early game though, the combat will feel quite basic. And that's how most Final Fantasies are anyway, or most action games for that matter. The dread? This doesn't feel like Final Fantasy. At least not the Final Fantasy that most of us know. Now obviously you'll see some callbacks to Final Fantasy 15 and 14 if you've played them. I saw clear elements of that. There's a fight where you see patterns on the ground indicating where the safe zone was for an attack. If you've ever done a raid in Final Fantasy 14, you would recognize that instantly. And of course you'd recognize the quick-paced free action combat of Final Fantasy 15. But beyond spells and items bearing the same name, if you were to look at Final Fantasy IX's combat and then look at Final Fantasy 16's, it's really hard to identify that these are in the same game series at all. It's hard to call this a dread for myself, as this is what I like in a Final Fantasy, but the passionate fans of older titles may have serious issues with this game's combat. But in order for something to stay alive, it must evolve past what we know it to be. The rings and difficulty levels will definitely help assuage the situation, but it won't solve it. This is personal preference. For me, I love it, and I think that Final Fantasy is finally where it needs to be. The music. Final Fantasy's music is one of its biggest components in playing any of the games in the series, and it would be criminal to continue this video any further without talking about it. The Solace, I'm happy to say that it doesn't disappoint at all. In fact, I think this is the best that the soundtrack has been since Final Fantasy X. This is so epic, holy shit. This music, everything is crazy. It's epic on a scale that matches the tone and scenes in the combat. There's a couple parts of some of the boss themes that get a little bit whimsical that felt wrong, but 98% of the time, it fits exactly what you'd expect from Final Fantasy. It's loud and in your face when it calls for it. It's soft and atmospheric when it needs to be. It helped drive so much of the action and pulls you into the moment. The dread... this is going to feel a little bit nitpicky, and hell, this might even be my fault. But there were times in the cutscenes where the music kind of overtook the dialogue. Music in games is meant to play a supporting role. I want to hear the characters over the music. A little mastering might have been in order. I hope it can be adjusted for both the gameplay and the cutscenes. That is to say, if you turn down the volume for the music, I hope that carries over into the cutscenes. The visuals. The game is gorgeous, and Final Fantasy is no stranger to that. They're really good at making games look beautiful. I played it in both performance mode, and then I went back on the graphical focus, and well, both were glorious. The environments seem detailed beyond reason or need. It doesn't do justice to watch YouTube videos or streams. It's the level of fidelity that you expect in next-gen video games. It's also quite the wake-up after playing Tears of the Kingdom for a month straight. I'm excited to see some of the more cinematic scenes later for myself. If I had to be critical about one of the things graphically, I guess it's the frame rate issues on the graphical modes, as opposed to putting it in performance. It's not often, but it does happen in some of the bigger scenes. The game runs fine when putting it on graphical modes, but some of the bigger action scenes did have some frame rate issues. Not bad, just some drops. I'm really glad that this stayed exclusive to PS5 because the absolute nightmare PR storm this would have been if it were released for PC and it wasn't properly optimized would have just been negative impact for the game. If I had to plug a score into this game, I'd probably give this, just based on the demo, a 9.5 out of 10. And yeah, that's really high. It's a really good game, and I think this is a great new direction for Final Fantasy. We'll be playing a lot of this over on twitch.tv/SolaceandDread, and you can follow us over on Twitter to keep up with everything that we're doing. Let me know what your thoughts are on Final Fantasy 16. Did you play the demo? Are you wanting to play the demo? Are you having trouble getting or justifying a PS5? Personally, I think that if you have a PS5, this is one of the few games that you absolutely should be picking up. It's one of the few games on the console that make it worth having the console. As harsh as that is to say, there just isn't a very large exclusive list of AAA titles. I think it's literally this and then Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I don't think that there's anything else that's a AAA title exclusive to the console. Maybe the Demon Souls remake. This console isn't new. It's 3 years old at this point. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. and long live the Turtle Kingdom.